Hello, everybody. Today is January 26th. This is the conformance meeting held bi-weekly to discuss conformance issues. And we all abide by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, which basically means we need to be excellent to each other. So welcome to the meeting, and let's jump in. If you'll be so kind to add your names to the agenda, let me share my screen, and then we can discuss the points at hand for today. Okay, note taker, thank you, Hippie, for taking the notes for us. Okay, first point from Hippie, leaders from CNCF graduated incubating projects and activities. There is again KubeCon, Cloud Native Con Europe 2021. So you have to register and submit by February the 7th. I don't know if Hippie, you want to say anything about that?
I basically wanted to open it up for the whole group to participate in that session, but what normally it ends up being is me or someone else from II submits for kind of a where we are and how to contribute session to KubeCon as part of our subgroup presentation. And obviously we've got till February 7th, we'll put that on the agenda, but wanted to solicit any feedback or thoughts on that.
Thank you. So yeah, anybody wanting to join that would be great.
Yeah, I think your session description sounds good. I think it's a useful time to show our progress and get other people involved. So yeah, I will definitely help out as I'm able.
Thank you. We'll put it together and definitely run it by you as we're submitting to see if we've left out anything or horribly misspelled all the data.
Sounds good.
Thanks for the support, Aaron. Okay, the next point is, I'll open it up as a PR that graduated these endpoints. Basically, they came into GA for 121. And if we go to, not there, we go to conformance, we see there is 3 points of technical debt, which is not allowable. We don't want that. So we've discovered the PR, and the PR tells us that this is alpha endpoints that is coming in, and these 3 endpoints here at the bottom is actually supporting those endpoints. We did comment on that, if you want to speak to that.
Sure. I've in the past attempted to work with our open API generation and our audit log metadata in order to help tie together the tests that we write to the endpoints that we need to test. And in this case, we have more API operation IDs getting added at URL paths that are /API/v1/ and then a very normal sounding name. There is no, our method for distinguishing alpha and beta APIs primarily has come from having API v1 alpha or v1 beta. And in this case, we've got 3 new APIs, and the conversation from Liggett notes that when we have sub-resources of things like v1 pods, they inherently have v1 status for the sub, what's the wording? The sub-resources. And it's confusing, and I'm trying to get a little more feedback from outside of API machinery before I head back in there to help convey that it is important that we have some type of metadata tracking. And I think there's a couple of ways to do that. One is I've got another thing in process, I think, for SIG release on trying to update our KEPs to include the the flags, the feature flag, and the status of that flag. And I'm not sure if it's a manual method we need to do, but it would be great if a particular operation ID had the metadata for the flag that it hides behind. And then maybe we have a separate area, because you can use the kubectl binary to query the API server, I believe, and get the list of, or no, sorry, the API server binary. You can run help, and it will list the flags and their current status. So we have a programmatic way to retrieve the status of feature flags, but I don't have a way to tie it together, even though it's in this one PR. Maybe we can look a bit deeper into the metadata generated to tie together specific operation IDs with their current alpha, beta, GA status. What we end up doing, and it's doesn't feel clean, is we end up going to our list of ineligible endpoints and add them to ineligible because they're currently at a beta state. And so we have a lot of endpoints that we'll need to go and revisit. So I think at least once a release, we need to revisit our ineligible endpoints and check the status. Yeah, what may happen is that they do somehow get they are considered GA, and we didn't check them because we added them to they're not part of conformance. And I just think a conversation needs to happen, and it needs to be broader than just API machinery. So as SIG architecture, we can come back and suggest, well, we have this metadata. Anyway, that's the uncongealed thoughts I have that are causing us pain currently.
My gut instinct is that tying this together via feature flags is maybe the wrong level. You say you can use help, but like, is that an API endpoint, or is that you run the binary with the word help?
It is currently that's via the compiled binary, and that only shows us the current status of the feature flags.
Yeah, that doesn't.
My other suggestion, and that's not relying on the binary, is inside of the KEP. So we could refer to the KEP. Within the KEP, tracking the feature flag and the list of operation IDs, which I don't think we currently track, so that there is now a database of all of the API operations and where they sit within the KEP process, so we can check. You can basically have an SQL query that lists the endpoints and their KEP and the status and the operation ID. It's
sure.
maintained by the community in that metadata.
Sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think KEPs have a machine-readable way of specifying whether they are in alpha, beta, or GA.
One moment. I just got a message today from, this will be released. How do you see your most recent messages? Let me see if it's part of release. SIG release. It was from Laurie today asking me to, and a bunch of others to update their information.
Okay.
And I have an open PR with that. And what's the easiest way to find my open PRs? That would be github.com.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess the point I was making, like, that is something that is lacking from KEPs, and it would be cool if we could land that. But I still feel like tying back to KEPs is also kind of weird. I guess it would be helpful to understand why API machinery is pushing back against the idea of including alpha or beta information in the open API spec. So I do feel like I saw some back and forth between you and Liggett, maybe, about why this is hard or undesirable, but I do not remember what the specifics were. So that's the sort of like, I think API machinery needs to contribute that to the discussion. And then I think SIG architecture is maybe a forum to discuss, like, actually we think it is important that whether or not fields or resources are alpha, beta, or GA is important to be machine readable.
Fair. I will create so my action item of that will be to create an issue and reference the comment that I have here to kind of get the conversation started and include relevant folks. And I think the request here is to add at minimum a release level, for lack of a better term, of alpha, beta, or GA, and possibly information on the feature flag. If that's, I have a separate issue open for the KEP process that I haven't promoted yet, but they're wanting me to see if I want to get that merged.
Feature flags are an inappropriate way to do this, because that's my take on it. The reason
process so I can understand
the reason I think feature flags are inappropriate is if you are running tests against a hosted version of Kubernetes, you won't have the same API server that they do. Querying the API via its discovery endpoint or something should, or its open API spec should be sufficient to tell you like what is enabled and what level, what version it is, I guess. So I hear Liggett, okay, I see Liggett's comment on this PR that says sub-resources don't have independent versions, so they inherit the REST API version and parent object. I guess the question then becomes, is there some non-REST way we can describe the version of sub-resources?
I've tried in the past to get extra metadata added, and because it's complex, and there's not a lot of people that fully understand the API machinery metadata generation. I remember one of the conversations being, we're going to wait till there's Open API v3 because it has the right fields for this.
Right.
But there are arbitrary fields that we can add in the same way that we use x dash something in the header fields to add arbitrary metadata that we could migrate. Add now and then migrate when we get the Open API v3.
Yeah. Yeah, I would try and figure out how to tie it together at that level, because a Rube Goldberg machine that ties to like KEPs or ties to feature flags, which are tied to KEPs, none of those are quite as discoverable as interacting over the Kubernetes API boundary with the system under test.
Yep.
Yeah.
In addition to that, one of the other things we found is that there are issues with the API audit machinery where verbs are dropped. And because we don't log in the audit log the actual operation ID, there is no way to distinguish between a few of these operations. And our hack currently has been for when there's no match, yet we are part of a test that hits the endpoints we're interested in, we go to specific URLs that include the name of the verb. Because there is no programmatic, it's a Rube Goldberg machine, if you will, of trying to figure out, well, what do we do when there's no programmatic way by inspecting audit logs to discover operation IDs when it's, you want to help me from
this the options one.
Options.
So that's what SIG mentions. That was for the proxy.
Is that, I think we'll end up discussing it in the PRs later.
Yeah, we're going to go to that in the PR.
Sure. Okay, I hear that. I think my closing thought here is there like one, if we can't do this in a nice automated manner, is there one central location where we have a list of what is excluded from conformance and why?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
You
what we
wanna-
do
there we go.
is if you go to API Snoop, you go to conformance progress. There's a list of our ineligible endpoints. Then we go click on that. So there's currently 75 of them, and each of them got a hyperlinked
Sure.
story behind this. For everyone, there's a reason or an issue or something that explains why they're ineligible. But very much to his point, it would be required that we actually discussed it yesterday internally, that we'll have to go review, because it could be that these things that we mark as ineligible get their alpha endpoints promoted with tests, and we don't notice these come in and they don't have properly tests because we can't see them. So it would be important for us to check that.
Right. So is this, does this file live in API Snoop, or does it live in Kubernetes?
It lives as an API Snoop as SQL queries that end up being pulled in to generate this table.
Okay. It may be worth considering finding a way to normalize that view so it's not a bunch of, basically I'm trying to think of like, how could we, one process I have in mind is like, how could we have the community open up pull requests into this thing to say like, hey, we're gonna consider these excluded, or we're gonna consider these eligible for inclusion now. And that way you have kind of via the pull request review, an audible way of who is approving the exclusion or inclusion of these endpoints. And then presumably, because you're linking back to issues and stuff, you can kind of derive a timestamp either from the issues themselves or from like the get blame of this file of like, how long ago has it been since we've checked on this? Does it need to be checked again? Sort of deal.
Ideally, that's what the Swagger file, which would be the optimal. And we've looked at different ways of dumping just JSON files that have the operation IDs and some slight metadata about them. That is almost a parallel to Swagger JSON that lived in KK, but we got pushback because it's real big. I mean, the Swagger file by itself is what, 3 or 4 meg now? And so if you look at all those operation ID, if we had any reasonable metadata, that file gets over 1 meg in size.
Right. So in an ideal world, all the information necessary to decide whether something is eligible or not is in that file. If it can't be, being in its own single file in a way that makes it easy to have a community pull request based workflow. It might reduce the toil, I guess, of maintaining it. Because when you describe it being a bunch of different SQL queries, that doesn't sound like something the community is going to feel empowered or knowledgeable to quickly update at a glance.
What if we had just a list of ineligible endpoints? We'll leave whether it's alpha or beta to our hack for now, but the ineligible ones, we could have just a list and a comment or a link without much metadata. So the conversation points around them getting added could be discussed or disputed, or because ideally we remove some of these when like we find a way to write a storage testing framework.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe we're over engineering at this point. I feel like a brief description and then a link to where that decision was made. And ideally that decision would be get a pull request or an issue or something. I know we're running long on this, but I'm talking about this just because of the next thing where Ken Owens has concerns that some resources don't make sense for, let's call it business logic reasons. Nothing to do with the machine parsable data and more to do with what those specific sub-resources are. And so if we come to a decision that we should exclude the status sub-resources, how would we document that?
I think K is probably the right place for that. Maybe in EDE conformance, because we have our metadata there that we pull from for what is part of conformance. It makes sense for there to be a list of things that are excluded from conformance in that same folder with the same approvers, so maybe even in that same folder.
Yeah, that could make sense as another way of doing it.
I'll look into creating an example PR with that metadata that we'll get Zach to create based on the SQL query, so that we have a starting point, and see if we won't reconsume that once it gets merged, using that as our definitive list of what we're not going to be testing for. Another thing that we could do there is, since we're adding, we go ahead and list every operation ID. We could make a mark of whether that's currently considered alpha or beta, or even have it sourced like in a tree form where the top level keys are alpha, beta, stable, and we list the operation IDs underneath that with whether they're, especially in the GA area, whether they're eligible for conformance or not.
Maybe.
Yeah, well,
that triggers my, boy, it sure seems like that information should be part of the API spec. But yeah, let's move on. I feel like I'm done talking about this. I'm just gonna go around in circles on it.
all right.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for
Yeah,
your valuable input. Can I roll over to the next, or Peter, do you have another point?
No, that's it. We need the push for the Open API spec to get updated, and as a backup, note this other way of adding data, the metadata file, to get away from our one-off doing SQL queries.
Good, which brings us to the next point. I had a good meeting with SIG Apps on Monday, and we basically had a discussion with Ken Owens, and he had some concerns regarding sub-resource status. That is actually not an API that's user-facing, and they asked if it actually makes sense for them to have conformance tests for those status in general, then not just for apps.
I think the pushback was most of that setting, particularly of setting the status, is something that's not done by end users of Kubernetes, but done more by controllers that are checking the objects in question and setting that status based on their observations of it. So any EDE test or conformance test that goes through and set that is inherently facing a type of race to watch it be set. You know, the best you could do is set it to something that's not valid or true, and watch the controller set it back to what is appropriate. And because many of the endpoints that are part of the apps include status endpoints, that was their quick summary on those status operation IDs.
I don't know. I agree with the reasoning. It's kind of like racy and hard to test. On the other hand, like it's user visible API surface area, I think. And so, you know, it's probably a bad idea to try and compete with some existing controller that's updating that. You know, you test the implementation you have, or you test the surface area you have, not necessarily the surface area you want.
I
think, yeah, maybe that's a broader. It could be a broader SIG Arch question, or certainly I would want input from my fellow sub-project owners on that.
We'll bring that up to the SIG Arch meeting on Friday and put that on the agenda for discussion. And maybe we'll send an email out to the mailing list today, so we can get a little broader feedback on that. I'm also the feeling that if we go ahead and set up a watch and we set the status to be offline or something, like we create something that we know the status should be A-okay, and then we set it to be not okay, and then wait in a watch for the controller to set it to what is the known good status. That might be one way. Or instead of trying to set the API directly by hitting it, we force the controller to hit it. And even though it's not, even if in our current way of scoring it is the E2E binary setting that flag directly, we watch it happen by the status changes reflecting in the status endpoint.
Yeah, so this is about hitting the status sub-resource for all of the built-in workloads. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'll send
Yeah.
out an email on that, and we'll discuss it at the broader meeting. Thanks for suggesting that.
Yeah. Because yeah, not that anybody actually does this, but conceivably, somebody could decide they want to write their own deployment controller or their own replica set controller or something. And
Yeah.
that controller would need to be able to hit the status endpoint and update it. And so conformance is kind of like verifying that that API endpoint does exist and is writable, even if it's not necessarily by an end user. This makes a lot more sense when you talk about CRDs, but then CRDs are going to have their own status endpoints, and so it's covering that doesn't necessarily get you the coverage on the built-in workloads. I feel like CRDs are probably more the motivating reason I would really want to check it on CRDs. I could see how maybe it's less important for built-in workloads, but yeah, somebody could decide to re-implement the built-in workload controllers. Maybe they want to write it all in Rust or something. Who knows?
The surface area of the API server is what we're certifying, and yep.
Yeah.
I will get that email out and make sure it goes to the SIG architecture about a couple of options to get the discussion going, and make sure I'll CC Ken in that. There was and Ken also expressed concerns about APIs unused by the community, and I don't think he was talking about status. He was looking at the large list of almost like architectural changes of object types that he doesn't see used anywhere.
Okay.
That he's never seen it. And I brought up that we've thought that before in conformance and tried to remove things and got near immediate pushback from people like using things in ways we never would have thought possible. Right. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that's the one. But I just wanted to bring up their concerns to the conformance meeting as a whole. I probably won't action anymore on that unless we want more discussion. He may reach out regarding his endpoints are not eligible, so that'll be part of the status thing, and I may mention
Sure.
and we'll make sure that happens. And then we've got some notes that thank you, Rian, for capturing those. I'm not sure how to pronounce our friend's name here in a respectful way, but I want to do so.
I don't know how to pronounce it either, unfortunately.
That human is offered support for prioritizing endpoints, because we were choosing them just like, well, there's a big list. We want to go to 1.9 because I'd love to see that disappear.
Sure.
So they may offer us support on that. So we'll communicate via email to see where that goes, and we'll be reviewing our issues before we turn them into tests. Rian will get back to him with a list of current tests that hit these unhit endpoints, and as Ken noted, they're not used a lot, so we don't have any. There's very few. There's like one endpoint I think Rian found.
Let's have a look quickly. Stable, and we go to apps. There's actually only one that is that one there. It's tested, but it's just a drive-by from another test. It's not specifically targeted by a test. It's accidentally touched by something else. So there's actually all these here is conformant. One that's tested but not conformant, and all these are open. And Aaron, just for your sake, to explain why we approached SIG apps is if we look at the we go down here, we've got what we're basically trying to work backwards, and we're now sitting at 1.9, which at all those endpoints. And if we go to 110, the detail, you would see that basically everything in 1.9 says apps. So everything down here up to there.
Apps became a thing about 1.9.
So apps is the owners of all the data in 1.9. So we try to help them and also get them involved to help us to try and clean this up as best we can before the end of this release.
We'll probably be our buddy SIG for the next couple of releases, if not longer.
So yeah, so they did offer to, I will make a list of what is, I already shared a list with them of what is open, where they are touched or not touched by tests, which other part I broke them down into families of APIs of similar things, all the replica set things together, and so they could, so they already viewed some information, but I'll keep on pushing information with them. And they did say that honestly, this is technical debt. They have big priorities, but they really want us to keep them involved, to help us to help them to get this over the line. So they're quite keen.
Sounds good.
Good. So that is for the agenda points, and that we can go into what is open. So finally, we got the proxy endpoints test going. The image that needed to be built was finally built. So Stephen were able to get the test merged and updated with a new image. It's looking fairly good. There is 2 flakes though. And we have created this PR here, which is addressing the flake. It is just about ready to go in. Stephen and Umichi is having a short discussion. Oh, we got our LGTM, so somebody can just slap approve on there in this meeting. It would be very kind. So yeah, Stephen, you want to speak to the change that we made here to kill the flake?
PR to reduce risk. I'll go over. Can you go over to the, yeah, thank you for the comments.
In the test code, sorry, in the details for the power job, that when it had actually failed, it looks like the pillars hadn't started completely before the test started trying to test the endpoints. So I just added in a watch to make sure that the service had completely started, was available before we started actually testing those endpoints and the pod ones. So that's what I believe will get rid of those flakes.
Okay, I'll look at it in depth later.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Stephen. Good job there. Looking forward to get all those endpoints in. Then we have an issue.
Options.
That +12 isn't +12 because of the options not getting counted.
Right.
And also head.
Right.
There's API. There's issues that I think Liget wants fixed in API server before he'll approve our test of it because it's testing things that are a bug. Is that
Oh, no,
No?
this is, no,
No,
this
that's
is
the last issue.
Edge gets converted into a get.
Oh, that's right.
And options just never get captured. It's so, SIG API machinery was thinking it's a SIG off problem. And
That's right. They're patching back and forth. This is in SIG off because they documented what happens around head. Is that which
yeah,
ticket is it?
yeah, it's in this one.
It's a 95
Yeah.
03.
I think there's a separate PR that we raised about the head and options.
Yeah, there's a separate PR that we created to address that. But at the moment we have the workaround to get options allocated, but head is getting lost. So the 12 should be 10 points by the time we get this merged.
Is it 10 or 8?
Yeah, we're going to get 10 because that's been able to do that match.
That's right. So head we're not going to get because we don't have any way to. Again, API machinery is pushing back on that one. And for the other options, even though it's not logged in the audit logs, Zach made a hack workaround to when we don't detect an operation ID and we're hitting this particular URL, because the URL for those tests includes the name of the options verbs, we are able to allocate it to the correct operation ID.
Exactly. Thanks,
Because it's
Steve.
modified in transit by API server before it gets to the audit logs. It's either removed.
Oh, it's not even saying.
Yeah, well, I found the issue. I agree. We should chase down SIGAuth until they punt back to SIG API machinery until we get a definitive answer on why aren't the head and options verbs being propagated.
Yeah, I chase down the SIGAuth on current issue until they punt. All right. Thank you for that, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, then thanks for that link. Then the next one is, let's have a look. Why did he do that? Control Z. Sorry about that. This is a pull request for 2 endpoints. Stephen, you want to speak to this test because this is also ready for approval. We've run it through the paces with the tests quite a lot.
So that's easier for us to.
And if we go to the PR history, there was nothing blocking us from merging. Stephen, I'll leave it to you to quickly explain what this test does.
Sorry, can you go across to the files change? Sorry,
No problem.
but been thinking about something else just recently.
Sorry, sorry, I'm putting you on a little bit on the spot there.
So it just goes through creating the service, and then it goes through doing the appropriate patch and with some appropriate watchings, and then I think it's got a delete at the very end of the test. This is one that I think Caleb had started a while back that we just got getting around to cleaning up. There was a little bit of pushback around 1 or 2 little settings, and I believe I've addressed them, but I haven't had any feedback from
Jordan.
Sorry, what was that, Aaron?
No, nothing. I mean, again, the answer for most of these is going to be like, I will review these offline. I don't feel like I can do a thorough review on camera. That would not be a good effective use of everybody's time here. So
Sure.
I will get to them as I have time.
would be
I believe everything's addressed on that PR, so to see some eyes from someone.
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. Good job. Thanks, Aaron, for your time. We do realize it's an effort. Thanks for putting in the effort for us. Then this is an update to an existing conformance test where it was hitting the stateful set replica set for scaling. It was hitting read and replace, but not the patch scale. So we just updated this test. Let's go to file change. Basically just add a little section at the bottom for patching, for patching the replica set, or the replica, sorry, for the stateful set. And then there was a little bit of pushback. The one is just a Go formatting thing that moved around the import, so we fixed that. And the other one was he suggested that we use the wait for running and ready, which turned out after some research I found that was for creating new. When you create new, you can use waiting for running and ready, and then I found an option for wait for status replicas, and that actually did the trick. We added that in. Haven't had feedback on that, but we believe that one is also ready. We also tested it thoroughly. It seems to be fairly solid. There's no flakes, no issues there. So I think, and it's a simple add-on. The next one, Stephen, I know there was a bit of an issue with the markdown file for this. Did you get around to it, or will we discuss it in the next meeting?
No, I think if you just open it up, I just wanted to, even though it's still got the old Go code from back when, because it was, I think, around 1.13, sorry, 1.13 is when it was written for originally. I'm going to just want to run it past Aaron about, I'm just going to replace the current watch stuff with the current watch tools, that process that was used for pod and pod status. So it's matching that sort of pattern of making sure everything's checked well. It seems to have been already been merged in previously PR back in November, I think it was.
Okay.
So would that just bring the test to be able to sort of like move forward if I'm using that sort of pattern of using the watch until?
I think so. Yeah, well, now's maybe a good time for me to raise, like, this isn't urgent, but I think we want to address it this cycle. I do feel like tests that are using this pattern are flaking. I'll paste a link, but I don't have like really concrete data on what the scope of the flaking is. But I was just checking around on triage for any tests that have the word should, that match the regular expression should ** life cycle. Because a lot of the tests that you wrote following this pattern are like should allow the life cycle of whatever, pod status, daemon set, what have you. And there are definitely test failures in there. It's kind of difficult to pick apart which of those are just like badly misconfigured jobs, or if these are signs that these tests are actually flaking. But as we get closer to code freeze and test freeze in the 121 lifecycle, I feel like we will want to prioritize deep flaking, because we should be holding conformance tests to a high bar of like not flaking. So it could be that there's something not quite right with that pattern, but I feel like maybe more data is required. So a long-winded way of saying, like, no, I don't think I have any objections to the test, to you writing the test as you described, following the pattern you described, but we may later discover that we need to fix this along with all the other tests that use that pattern.
Yeah, I agree. As I'm going through it, I'll try and see if I can look at some of these flakes and then see whether or not I can extend the test and try and
Okay.
see if there's a way I can spot the flake and maybe get some extra feedback from people.
Okay.
But thanks.
I added an AI. For that.
I'll try to open an issue if I've got concrete data.
I think actually we, Caleb, a few days ago, got a ping about, I think that particular test flaking on, I think it was the test grid for Node, and yet it was failing consistently. But when we looked on the release blocking, I think it was working perfect.
Okay.
So I'm just not too sure whether or not there's a issue where the environment that it's running on seems to create more flakes than other test grid setups. Because I think we had another issue with another test grid before the holiday break period. I can't remember the group that was for.
Sure. Yeah, I know I got pinged. I got pinged separately on a test change to the scheduler predicates test that verifies that two pods that attempt to allocate the same host port are correctly scheduled. This update then went a step further and verified that if they are correctly scheduled, traffic should route to them correctly. And that seems to have broken some people's setups. I don't personally honestly know where I stand with regard to we should take that functionality check, that extra functionality check, and put it into a different conformance test, or we should leave it in the current test, because that is reasonable behavior for an end user to expect. And if it doesn't work that way, I think that's a bug in the underlying Kubernetes implementation. You may just not have noticed until now. I don't know if that's the same issue you're talking about, though. Anyway, I want to be respectful of the time we have left. I know you said there was something that was blocking your coverage of a couple of endpoints.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, that's issue there, or pull request there, has been back and forth quite a bit, and it's blocking basically 7 endpoints on the proxy endpoints. If you want to speak to the discussion we had last week, discussed it with Clayton.
Clayton said he would look at it, and he hasn't had a chance to yet. There was a question, this is just 7 days ago, Liggett had another question. Can you click on that real quick to bring us back up to his question?
Well, let's go there.
So this is quite an old thing, and I've still struggled to wrap my head around the solution to it. And sometimes even like trying to figure out exactly what the request is.
So sounds like you need to answer his question about whether or not we need to append a append a slash. And it sounds like maybe he believes the implementation of what you were doing is incorrect, and more unit test coverage would prove why this is incorrect.
Let's go at this bottom here. Can I, who's commits?
Those commits are mine.
There are your commits.
The problem was my previous commit and the history before this commit, I had this, I thought I had a solution, and then Leggett brought up the whole thing around the RFC having a requirement for adding a trailing slash if there was no trailing slash scene, as I understand it. But I think I've gone down the wrong path with this change, and I'm just, I need someone that's a little bit more combination of networking, which is like understanding the problem a little bit more, because I'm somewhat stuck on it. And I think, I think I just need to just answer the feedback by I need other eyes on it. I think the previous commit is actually closer to the solution, but I'm just not sure where to go next with it.
Okay. I am not the person with sufficient expertise to help you with this. I know that Fede is pretty good at triaging SIG API machinery stuff. Do you know who I'm talking about? I gotta find his name.
Geo?
Yeah.
Yeah. We will reach out to Fede Bongio to get some pair time and to get
I wouldn't do it so much as pair time, but I would like assign him or CC him on the issue and say like, I need help with X. Can you find somebody who can help me with X? And that can help. But I also interpret Liggett's last comment as like, I think there's still an outstanding question, as I think the last thing in his comment about what is the behavior without the trailing slash has not been answered. If you've
try both and see.
Yeah, so maybe he's asking for you to like, could you conduct an experiment with that and tell me what the results were, and that will help us understand if we do or do not need to add it.
That's our last one for the meeting. Other than I just dropped a link to something else that Caleb is working on to my right that might be good just while we got you on the phone to hear your thoughts on. He's I'll tilt the camera. Hello. Hey. He's just a
long time no see.
Hey man, let's see it.
I'll drop this for Rian as well.
Here we are. Stick that into.
Okay, so to answer the last question about how would credentials get added to this if it was run as a proud job, this is what workload identity is for. So you give the ProwJob a service account, and then the Kubernetes service account that ProwJob runs as is bound via workload identity to a Google Cloud service account. I have one created. I'm pretty sure it already lives in the K10 Prow build trusted cluster, which has a service account that gives you permissions to run the audit script, basically. Read all the resources that audit script needs to touch.
And the Google secret there for us to be able to do a git push and create based on our, so git in our GitHub token, that path.
Yes.
Previously, we had written that out by using Google Secrets. I think earlier that Bruno may have missed adding to that.
Okay. So the same service account that the job runs as, we would set up credentials so that service account is allowed to read that secret. And then you can have the job use gcloud to read from that secret. Another option, well, yeah, I guess I kind of like that approach better. I'm not sure. Another option would be to add the token as a secret to the Prow build cluster, the same way you bug test infra on call to add secrets to the google.com Prow build cluster. And then you could mount it into your job as a regular file.
Which one would you prefer? We also,
I guess I hadn't thought of it that much. I kind of like the idea of using Secret Manager. It doesn't integrate as cleanly with ProwJobs. It does require that you write a little more script gunk to pull the secret out yourself. And I'm wary of people accidentally dumping their secret into logs. It's also why I'm wary of the cat GitHub token thing. But totally recognize that. Okay, so then using Hub versus using something that is under our control. That's the previous comment.
So use Hub, use Google Secrets, use a service account that we create or that's already part of this particular.
Sorry, I'm just checking real quick to see if anybody has it. Yeah, it does.
I'm sure that the production build cluster, privileged build cluster already has these secrets there, I would assume.
So I want you to run this in the community's trusted build cluster, not the google.com one. The google.com trusted build cluster is the one that has the Kate CI robot GitHub token and all sorts of really super privileged stuff. We don't have that token available in this community's build cluster yet. So I do have a service account. It's called Kate's Infra GCP Auditor. It's already got the right credentials. So I would use that. And the ProwJob that I linked in the description should be something basically copy paste as an example of how to use that service account.
Okay. If we'll add because this thing at the end where it has the CP-A, that git diff, where we see if there's a diff, that's the creating of the PR. And we append this using the Google secret to create the GitHub token or running Google secrets and passing it out on without running it to a file.
Sure. I guess I'm kind of stuck on, we are over time, I'm sorry. I'm stuck on whether you should just use the thing you're already using, or if you should just use the thing that the Kubernetes community is already using.
You mean the Google create or push PR
Yeah.
Golang code?
The Golang creator. You're going to need an image that has Hub pre-installed. Whatever. I don't have strong objections to it. Whatever allows you to get it done the fastest.
Yeah.
Just because I don't have objections doesn't mean other people might insist that you use the PR creator. But you are welcome to try this approach. I use Hub pull request from my laptop all the time, so I certainly trust it. Yeah.
So I think I've always been trying to find new images or create new images takes time. And so do we have Hub and something already out there that we could use
No.
with it? And no. So I'm reluctant to go through and create a new image for as far as the time to get this piece over the line. Unless we want to start using that approach. This just uses Git and is able to create the PR, I believe.
It's using Hub. I can see it. Hub PR list and pull request.
There it is. Hub list.
Yeah.
So where does the Hub pull request? Sorry, I missed that part. Yeah. Okay, we will have to do that somehow.
Yeah, which like I said, I personally don't have a problem with it. But yes, this looks good. Thank you for working on this. I will check back in with y'all about pushing this forward tomorrow or Thursday. Sorry, tomorrow or 2 days from now. My Thursday, your Friday.
Sounds good. I've got Caleb on it. I've got some health things I've got to do with the next couple of days.
Great.
But thanks for supporting us and showing up consistently. We appreciate your support and let us know how we can help you with migrating all the jobs or doing what we can in that regard.
Okay, we'll do.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Have a good day. Cheers.